Welcome inside the Broncos studio for an episode of Altitude Advantage. I am your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez, alongside our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla. The draft is basically here, and we're very excited. We're going to get to the nitty-gritty of those picks and things like that. But as we get to the final hours, really, before we get into our draft talk and really see what the Broncos do with that 20th pick overall in the first round, what are your final thoughts leading into this day?
Yeah, I think excitement, number one, right? Like always this time of year, you're excited to see what the team's going to do, who they're going to pick, which talented young players they're going to add to the roster. I also think there's this feeling of kind of calmness and like there's no uneasiness that has maybe it exists in other NFL cities right now, especially if you're trying to find that quarterback. And I think last year, if you look back, when the Broncos were looking to find that franchise player, hadn't yet drafted Bo Nix, there was definitely this uneasiness externally of like, what's going to happen? Are they going to find that guy? Are they going to be able to get their quarterback? Are they going to trade up? Are they going to trade back? What's going to happen? Everything is just, to me at least, it feels a little more calm now that you've got Bo Nix under center. And we heard last week, Sean Payton said, it's not like in the draft room we're bringing up Bo Nix all the time and saying like, how does this guy fit with him? Or what would Bo think about this? But there is this overarching sense of, hey, we've got that position figured out. It's really nice. And now you can go and just get a talented player. And we talked last week, right, about how a weapon isn't necessarily just a running back or a receiver or tight end. Any talented player is going to help defensively. It could help the Broncos get off the field more, get more short fields, force more turnovers. Offensively, if you find a guy that can help you, maybe it's not necessarily in the way that everyone thinks with like this game-changing speed necessarily, but is there a player that can just help you improve offensively? Is it a defensive lineman, right? So there's a lot of options. I think that there's maybe more uncertainty as to which way the Broncos will go than in recent years. We do know that they're going to get a running back at some point. We just don't know when, and I know that's been a popular first-round pick or projection, rather, but we don't know exactly when that's going to happen. We think it'll happen at one point. So I think, yes, for final thoughts, it's that I don't really have a great, and we'll talk more about kind of projections for Thursday night. I don't have a great sense of what's going to happen. I do know there's still areas the Broncos can target, whether it's they need a running back. Sean Payton said whether in the draft or free agency they still want to add a couple more receivers. I think you always want to add depth along the lines. We've seen the Broncos build their defensive and offensive lines, but you can always do that. And then, in free agency, we saw them add it at tight end, at linebacker, at safety. Do you kind of double up there and get more talent? So there are still some areas where you can add on this roster, right? But there's not that gaping hole. And so I think for Broncos fans, it should be pretty exciting because I don't think you really know until you tune in Thursday night exactly what's going to happen. Yeah,
well, like you said, it's very calm. It's the calm before the storm, as that saying has been said a lot, especially when you look at just the way that the Broncos have drafted in the past. I mean, George Payton has had really good draft classes going into this. We've talked about it again last week, the way that his picks have gone on to become all pros and gone to Pro Bowls, especially when you have those picks in that later round, because they do have 7 selections in this particular draft. Now, when you look at the first round, 20th overall pick, we don't listen to the outside noise, but there are little, murmurs and little whispers that the Broncos can potentially trade up or down to see kind of what happens there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think to start your point about, hey, there's 7 picks, right? That's an important part of this because Sean Payton likes to say a lot, people pay so much attention to that first round pick. But this year the Broncos have 3 top 100 picks, which they haven't had that many here in quite a few years. So you're going to add talent certainly over the first 2 days. And then even going into day 3, are you going to find a Devon Vele, a Jonathan Cooper, some of these guys, undrafted players obviously have had a huge tradition of success here for the Broncos, whether you're talking about a Phillip Lindsay or Chris Harris Jr. or Rod Smith, just to rattle off a couple. So there's talent to be found all over the place. That's where George Payton's scouting ability comes in, where the scouts themselves who have done all this work really make a huge impact, and you kind of see all the work that they've put in.
Right.
So it's not just about the first round pick, but obviously the first round pick garners a lot of attention. You asked specifically about trading up, trading back. I think if you go and check out DenverBroncos.com, we did an article on the trade history of both Sean Payton and George Payton. Sean Payton prefers to trade up, but the Broncos haven't made a first-round trade, I believe, since 2019 when they traded back to get Noah Fant. I believe you have to go all the way back to 2016 for the last time they traded up. And so there hasn't been movement in the first round for the Broncos necessarily. But I think if you're asking me which one is more likely, I'm going to say up, just because this feels like we heard Sean Payton say he likes to hit driver on golf holes. And we know that Sean Payton likes to swing for the fence, to add in a baseball reference there for you.
Appreciate that.
But this is a team that feels like, and we'll talk about this more in a second, it feels like they're on the edge of taking that step. And so if a player falls, and we've seen a lot of running backs linked to the Broncos, whether it's an Amarian Hampton, right, from North Carolina, Ashton Genty from Boise State. Those are kind of considered the top two. Travion Henderson from Ohio State, maybe the third back, kind of, at least according to these national rankings. If a Genty falls a little bit, he's kind of currently in that 5 to 8 range. You've seen a lot of projections. If he falls to 10, outside the top 10, do you consider going up to get him and get a guy that, was a Heisman runner-up and is a really talented player? If you decide that Colston Loveland is a guy that you really want to pair with Evan Ingram, the tight end from Michigan, do you go up and get him? I don't think the Broncos, and this is where I think that the experience of George Payton and Sean Payton comes into play. You're not going to trade up for the sake of trading up.
Right.
And maybe right now it's not possible, or maybe the way it plays out doesn't play out in a way that you need to trade up. But I think if needed, if somebody, and we don't know who it is, we don't know who they have their eye on, but if that person falls, I think we know they're not afraid to move up and go get that guy. And talking about George Payton, he's traded up as well. We talk about the second round in 2021. They saw a guy they wanted in Javonte Williams. He went up and got him.
Right.
And then obviously Riley Moss, Marvin Mims, like you talk about other guys that they've gone up and gotten since Sean Payton and George Payton have been together. They've been willing to pull that trigger. I think it's just all about the right guy. And then kind of the flip side of that is that, hey, if none of the guys you like you like to have, I would think, 3, 4, 5 guys that you want to pick there. If they're not available, find a way to trade back. But I think you're talking about the rumors we've heard, the whispers. It's that there's so many teams that kind of want to trade back. You've seen that maybe the price won't be as much as it usually is to move up. That's why I could see if somebody falls, maybe it doesn't cost the Broncos as much as it normally would. They move up and go get their guy. It could go either way, but I would maybe lean that direction.
Well, during their pre-draft conference, George Payton mentioned that this is probably the most prepared he's felt in a while, that him and Sean are definitely on the same page. And like you said, it's the fact that they have this consistency over the last couple of years where they know what the other person wants, they know what the other person expects, and whatever player comes in here. And I think the big key of what you mentioned is that they're not afraid to pull the trigger on that and say, hey, if we want this guy to be a Bronco, it's almost like it's decided, he will be that. And so you kind of see that aggressiveness play out. But one thing that I've really seen from just what they've said they've done in free agency as well as the draft is the way that they've been able to find these pieces. I feel that what they did in free agency is very huge, obviously solidifying their pick from last year with Bo Nix becoming the franchise quarterback. And now it's they're on, like you mentioned, the edge of potentially going on and really making a run in this division. That's also going to continue to get better because talent is talent, and other people are going to try to find the talent where they can. And to your point, in the second round, just some notable picks from there: Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, like you mentioned, Nick Bonito, and just the way that we've been able to find third-round picks with Jonah Ellis, Quinn Miners, and a couple other. Troy Franklin was later in the fourth round. So there's definitely gems along the way, and this front office has been really good at identifying those things. So when you look at the way that the Broncos can move forward and how this sets them up for the rest of the season, how do you see the talent pool kind of growing from there?
Yeah, I think if you're a Broncos fan, it's exciting because the one, we talk about, hey, is there a need, right? And you don't see a glaring need except for maybe adding to the running back position.
Which is clear, and they've mentioned that.
Right, and George Payton has said, hey, we're going to add a running back. But I think what's exciting to me is that if you add a quarterback in the first round, it takes some time. And Bo got it as quick as anybody gets it, right? You talked to John Elway on Monday night, and he said, took me a lot longer than Bo to figure things out. My rookie year was nowhere near as good as his. So Bo was the exception, not the rule. But you look at quarterback, maybe you look at corner, offensive tackle. There are positions where it takes, in my mind at least, rookies, wide receiver generally, it takes rookies a little while to catch on. Running back seems to be a spot where you can put a guy in and he can go. And especially for a team that already has an offensive line that is among the best in the NFL, if you can put a guy in there and you pair him with an Audric Esime, a Jaleel McLaughlin, you put him in there and he can just run behind Quinn Miners and Mike McGlinchey or Garrett Bowles or Ben Powers. Like that sounds pretty nice, right? And so to me, if you're a Broncos fan and you're looking at this scoring offense that was already top 10 in the league, took a big jump. You've got Bo Nix now going into year 2. You've got Marvin Mims, who looked spectacular at the end of next year, hopefully continuing that. Cortland Sutton is always going to be this guy.
Mr. Reliable.
And then Devon Vele, Troy Franklin, you hope they take another step. On the defensive side of the ball, you only got better by adding pieces, right? And so when you look at it, you say, okay, this is a team ready to compete. And now the one hole that we have as far as holes go is a position where, you can find a guy that should be able to contribute right away. And so that to me is exciting. When you look at what the Broncos did last year in terms of winning 10 games, but not just winning 10 games, they did that while being, I believe, 1-5 in one-score games. That tends to be, and we've talked about this a lot, that tends to be a metric
the buckets,
that balances out, right? And has a little bit of randomness in it. And over time, you tend to see that kind of regress to like a 50-50 mark, whereas a lot of the Broncos wins were convincing wins. So if they can, every year's a new year, but if you can keep that convincing win bucket, if you will, get a
where
few
it
of
needs
those,
to be,
get some of those one-score games, get it closer to 500 or even tilted in your favor. You've got a more potent offense, hopefully. You've got a defense that's added some pieces. It could be a really exciting year. Just assuming you add a few talented guys here later this week.
You mentioned that I spoke to John Owen. He said the sky's the limit for Bo Nix. And he said that one thing that he feels surprised a lot of people was the fact that this defense played so well last year. And I found that interesting because George and Sean Payne both mentioned that a good defense is only going to help your offense. Adding defensive players is only going to help your offense. You mentioned it again on the pod from last week where you said these weapons people think are offensive weapons. And yes, the running back is key, and you are going to need that, especially when you're looking at certain third down situations. But you want to find that guy that can kind of just make all the pieces fit in general. And that doesn't necessarily always come in an explosive wide receiver or running back, things like that. So I think the way that this mindset of this team has been able to grow, that grittiness is continuing to show in the positions that and the type of guys that they're adding to this roster. Now, the draft is always an exciting time. This is my first draft here with the Broncos, so I'm very excited to be here. Obviously, see how the magic works. But what are you most excited about, especially around this time? It's such a To me, my favorite part of the draft is the fact that you see these young guys reach their potential, reach their full dream, come to reality, and it's their first day of school all over again. And you look back and you look at Nick Bonito's, as when they called him and he's crying, or Bo, and you find these moments and you flash forward to where they are now, and it's really exciting to be here at the start of the journey.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's just that it's the start of their journey. They've all worked really hard to be here. There's some great stories. We get to know these guys over the years, and this is the start of that. And, you don't know when Jonah Ellis and Troy Franklin and Devon Vele come in, like, what are they going to be? But you get to be there for that first moment, and you watch them develop, and it is the highlight so far of their careers. And so it's fun to be there and experience that. And then, this time of year, the optimism is unmatched, right? Like everybody's raring to go and poised to do great things in April and in the off season. So excited. This is a team that feels like it's really close, like you mentioned. And so just seeing which guys they add that are going to help them push toward that next step. I'm excited to see that.
I'm anxious is what I feel like. And we actually spoke to Monte Ball, who's going to be in Lambeau to announce a pick for the Broncos. And he mentioned just that full circle moment that he's going to have going back. Obviously, he played at Wisconsin and then being able to be there. And he's like, I'm just excited to represent the Broncos here and kind of see what talent they're adding. He mentioned that this draft class has a lot of good running backs, whether it's from the first round or later in the draft. He mentioned he's like, they're going to get a good one, no matter where it is, it's a good draft class of running backs coming in. And talking to Tony Scheffler, who announced the pick last year, he just mentioned that it's one of those things that when you go full circle, moments just happen at the draft. One thing in particular, he mentioned that he announced Jonah Ellis as the pick. And he's like, I actually knew Jonah's father from his playing days in Detroit. And he's like, so the fact that I had that moment, obviously his viral moment, but he had that moment where he's able to announce the pick of his former, a friend, and now his son's in the league. Those are the kind of stories that come out the draft that you didn't even see coming. Yeah,
and the Broncos will have a Make-A-Wish recipient announce their first round pick. Like you mentioned, Monte Ball is going to announce a pick. So there's always these fun elements. And then then we get back to work. But for a few days here, we get to realize these dreams and see some of these dreams come to life.
Well, there you have it, Broncos country. Once again, we appreciate you guys tuning in for another episode of Altitude Advantage. As always, I'm your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez, alongside our draft guru and lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla.